Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, October the 12th, 2023. I went to boarding school. In fact, I was packed off to boarding school when I was 7, and I can remember my first day at school. My mother took me to this imposing building, at least it felt imposing at the time, and we went into the porch, and there was a list of all the boys' names who were at the school. My mother looked at this list and she said, oh yeah, look, Prince of Jordan is there. And sure enough, Prince Abdullah of Jordan, Prince Abdullah as he was then in 1970, was a pupil at the school. Of course, he's now the King of Jordan. I did get on with him quite well, and I was in his class very briefly. I remember, he was really good at French. He came top of the class in French, if I remember rightly. But that was my first meeting with someone who had very strong opinions about the Middle East. Obviously, clearly he was putting forward the Arab point of view as an 8 or 9-year-old child would. 8 or 9-year-old childs at the best of times, they're into sort of guns and stuff like that. And I can remember him sort of running around, being very interested in, warfare, guns, that kind of stuff. Showing his obvious support for his country and the Arab cause. So that was my first introduction to the Arab-Israeli conflict. So it's from the perspective of a 8 or 9-year-old child. My other memory of him was that at the dining room table, him and his brother Faisal were talking in Arabic, and they got reprimanded by a prefect because it was supposedly rude to talk not in English at the dining table. I think that was quite unreasonable. So that's what I want to do today. I want to talk about the horoscope of King Abdullah, and because I went to school with him, because I sort of have memories of him, I have some sympathy. I have sympathy for him, and so I want to look at his horoscope. But before I do that, I want to look at what's going on in the skies today, which is Thursday, October the 12th, 2023. So here we go. This is the position of the planets on Thursday, October the 12th, 2023 for New York, set for noon. So what is the main thing going on? Well, the main thing going on is here. Mars has moved into Scorpio. So Mars has been in Libra for some time. And Mars does not work really very well in Libra. It's the sign of Mars's detriment, because Mars rules Aries, therefore it's in its detriment in Libra. So Mars moving into Scorpio is a big change for Mars. Mars moves from a sign in which it's weak to a sign in which it's strong. Mars rules Scorpio. Some people say Pluto rules Scorpio, but it doesn't. The only planet that rules Scorpio is Mars. And so that means today it's going to be easier to assert ourselves from now on. We're going to be living in perhaps angrier times. Mars rules two signs. It rules Aries and it rules Scorpio. And sort of Aries is the sort of extroverted aggression, expressing one's energy in a direct way, getting direct results. Mars in Scorpio is a bit more subtle. It sort of goes perhaps in a sort of more roundabout way. It still gets what it wants. And yeah, it's a reminder of the Scorpion and its sting. Mars in Scorpio can be quite vengeful, and so we have to watch out for this. Okay, certainly between now and the end of November, because Mars stays in Scorpio until the end of November. But yeah, in the short term, today, people are going to be stronger and more powerful and better able to look after their own interests and watch out for the sting. So don't push people too far, because they could sting, and I suppose we could sting as well. So always watch out for the sting. So that is the most important thing going on today. It might nonetheless be a little confusing today, because the moon, you can see the moon in Virgo is opposition Neptune in Pisces. So emotions could get confused, and perhaps not helped by the fact that Mars is in Scorpio. People might get the wrong idea. What do people, when we, don't, I suppose we mustn't try too hard to understand what people are thinking and feeling, because with moon opposition Neptune, we might get it wrong. Also worth pointing out that the moon is applying to a trine of Pluto. So yes, that's kind of picks up on the Mars in Scorpio symbolism. Moon trine Pluto, expressing our feelings in such a way that can cause something of a transformation. It could be very intense, and as far as what we say is concerned, we have to be careful, because Mercury is square Hades. Hades, the hypothetical planet, connected with sort of death and garbage. And so if you have Mercury square Hades, our language could be really bad. A lot of swear words, bad words, that kind of thing. There's that temptation, at least, because it depends who we are. For myself, I'm not someone that really swears at all, but other people, that's something to watch out for. So whether it's us using bad language or other people using bad language, we do have to watch out with Mercury square Hades. And Mercury also rules thought processes, so we might have some very disturbing thoughts. Particularly if we're a Gemini. Geminis have all sorts of disturbing thoughts all the time. I'm speaking as a Gemini. But with Mercury square Hades, we have to watch out for that. But we need to remember that it's only thoughts. Thoughts in themselves shouldn't be too painful. We just have to let them pass. So that's the main theme for today. I think it's for today is mixed. When you're doing these forecasts for the day by day, the moon becomes very important. The fact that the moon is opposition Neptune and Mercury is square Hades, there's plenty of scope here for misunderstanding what's going on. So overall, I would say don't jump to conclusions and don't do anything drastic. Don't do anything or say anything you can't take back. Let me now move to my forecasts for the 12 signs. So let's move to them. I did my forecast for the 12 signs. Here they are. Forecast for today, which is Thursday, October the 12th, 2023. Aries, Mars, your ruler, moves into Scorpio. Mars is the ruler of Scorpio, and as a result, your position is going to be strengthened. You'll have more power at your disposal than usual, and you'll have a good understanding of the underlying emotional currents. This means that in close relationships, you'll have your finger on the pulse. Taurus. Powerful people are moving onto the scene. They know how to assert themselves and they can be emotionally manipulative. You then have to decide how best to deal with them. Sometimes strong people can be a bonus, and at other times they can be a nightmare. But whatever happens, you need to tread carefully. Gemini. There is nothing wrong with being suspicious. Not everything is fine, not everyone is acting in good faith. And by keeping an open mind, you'll give yourself the best chance of not making mistakes. Still, you do have some dark thoughts, the kind of thoughts that are typical for a Gemini. Make sure that they don't translate into unpleasant language, or even worse, into unpleasant actions. Cancer. You're able to create change through the power of your words and even your mannerisms. But it might not be immediately apparent how strong your position actually is. Indeed, it's often the case that the greatest of changes are hardly noticeable when they first start playing out. Elsewhere, a sudden blast of creativity has amazing results. Leo. Home and family need to be treated with a certain amount of caution. If you put too much energy into your domestic life, then problems could emerge. Perhaps you'll clash with other members of your family. On the other hand, activities connected with real estate could prove very fortunate between now and late November. Virgo. Even though the moon is in your star sign, it could be a difficult day. You and other people are unlikely to be on the same wavelength, and if you're working, the things you're asked to do might not make much sense. In terms of money, tread carefully. Not everyone can be trusted, and the information you receive may not be entirely true. Libra. It may feel that some of the pressure is starting to ease. For example, Mars has now left your star sign, meaning less anger and fewer arguments. But in relationships, you still have to watch out, and there's a possibility that you make mistakes. Perhaps you'll underestimate someone's sensitivities. Scorpio. Mars moves into your star sign, where it stays until late November. You get a blast of energy, and it's going to be so much easier for you to get things done. And through your stubborn persistence, you'll get through the various obstacles. But in relationships, don't push it, because getting what you want might have a cost. Sagittarius. You don't entirely know where you are going, because your assumptions about the way forward were based on a false premise. You could continue on your journey, but that's probably not advisable. Better to stop what you're doing and get your bearings. And by acting quickly, you can put yourself back on the path. Capricorn. In your social life, there are changes. People leaving, people returning. And in general, the stronger players are returning, symbolized by Mars moving into Scorpio. Powerful friends who are both loyal and unforgiving. But some people are flakes, and the sooner you say goodbye to them, the better. Aquarius. You seem to have a good idea what you want, especially in terms of your career, and you won't take no for an answer. The energy comes from you yourself, and between now and the end of November, you can make spectacular progress. But it's important to have a long-term view, because in the short term, few things are guaranteed. Pisces. There's a danger that you keep running over old ground without accomplishing very much. Perhaps because it's easier to stay exactly where you are than to do some exploring. But things are changing, and you're expected to reach out, to find new ways of being and new ways of expressing yourself. A challenge, but I think a challenge worth taking. Let me now transition to the I Ching. And as always, I threw 3 coins in the air and I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for people watching this video? So the first hexagram I threw was this, the abysmal, the abyss, hexagram 29. It is difficult, but it suggests we're doing something which we kind of know is a bit dangerous. We're sort of circling around this big hole in the ground, and what we mustn't do is fall in. At least that's our aim. But you know what the problem is, that if we're involved in something dangerous, you know, we kind of get used to it. Whatever we're doing, I don't know. Every week I use a brush cutter trying to cut Scotch broom, and you know, I mean, it's a potentially dangerous thing. You've got this rotating blade, and goes over your foot. I mean, that's it. So, you know, maybe I'm too used to the danger of using a brush cutter. You know, whatever dangerous activities we're involved in, we can just get used to them. They become familiar. It's the nature of human beings. At first, when we start doing something dangerous, it really seems scary, but keep doing it again and again, and it just becomes routine. And I think we might be in this kind of situation. We're involved in something that we're just very familiar with. Maybe it's a person that we're very familiar with. We know there are dangers, but we just keep going because, you know, nothing bad has happened in the past and we feel quite familiar with it. But today there is a danger that something goes wrong. So if you're doing anything dangerous, particularly if it's out of habit, and I suppose that includes driving. I mean, driving is an incredibly dangerous activity. People do it all the time. They get used to it. They get familiar with danger. But whatever that dangerous activity you're involved in, don't be complacent, because there is a danger that something goes wrong. And when something goes wrong, from an I Ching perspective, you fall in the pit. And at some level, it does seem that today we could fall into the pit today. And we find ourselves in a complete mess. So if you do find yourself today in a complete mess, because this line moves, and this line moves as well. This first line is about being complacent, about a danger, and potentially falling into a pit. This second line also moves, and that's about being in the pit, and it gives advice about what to do when we're at the bottom of the pit. So if things go wrong and you find yourself, you know, whatever disaster, I mean, I don't mean disaster literally, but whatever big problem you're facing today, the advice is, in the first instance, don't do anything. Because probably the first thing you try to do is going to make the problem even worse. And the suggestion is that what you need to do is get some help. Think about the situation. Get help. There are outside forces, friends, whatever, who can help you get out of this situation. So when you fall in the pit, the I Ching does have a kind of a positive note here, because it says, yeah, but it's actually a way out of the pit. But we just got to be careful how we do it. And the first impulse is probably not going to be the right impulse. Of course, within reason. I mean, you know, if we fall over in the middle of a wasp nest, you know, we just got to get out. Isn't that right? I don't know. Maybe there's a better thing to do. Maybe I don't know quite exactly what one's supposed to do. So that's the first hexagram, and this hexagram it does move. It moves to hexagram number 3, difficulty at the beginning, and that's a sort of similar theme. We're in a difficult situation, and perhaps because we've fallen into the pit. And to begin with, things are tough. Now, in the translation of the I Ching by Greg Winkup, he doesn't actually call this hexagram difficulty at the beginning. I think he calls it something like gathering support. So a much more positive spin from a different translation, because difficulty at the beginning is the Wilhelm translation by Richard Wilhelm. The Greg Winkup translation, which is more brief, talks about gathering support, so it doesn't even mention a problem in the title. So it's about being a situation where we need to get support from other people. We mustn't feel that we have to deal with a problem on our own. At the beginning, it's tough, but we get support. We do whatever we have to do to start resolving the problem, and sooner or later, the problem we're facing will start to resolve, provided we handle things correctly. I mean, we just mustn't feel that we, on our own, can sort the problem out. So these two hexagrams, I don't think they're that bad, in the sense that there's a happy ending or the suggestion of a happy ending. So if you do find sometime during the day that things look really bad and you're stuck in the pit, don't panic. Just think about the situation, get the support you need, and I think you'll get out of the pit. And now, if you are literally walking around in an environment where there are big holes in the ground, then don't. Just stay away, because then, disaster beckons. But I suppose most people do not live in an environment with huge holes in the ground. Anyway, so that's the I Ching, and I'm now going to go back to the astrology. And I want to talk about the horoscope of King Abdullah II. Now, why would I want to talk about King Abdullah II now? Well, when I was at school, in the same school as him in 1970, 71, the Middle East was ablaze. When I went that year, at that time I went to school, 1970, Jordan was, Jordan was on the brink, as the aftermath of the 1967 war against Israel, which the Arab states lost. I think the Arab armies were not much good, except the Jordanian army was the best army in the region, and I think that was they sort of recovered. They came out with some honor, and I think that probably that helped his father. What was his father? King Hussein. That must have helped his position. But 1970, it was really difficult, and I think that the country only sort of the king sort of hung on by his fingertips. And so, we potentially have a similar situation now. Okay, may not be as bad as it was for Jordan in 1970, but you can see that King Abdullah is, he obviously is sympathetic to the Palestinian plight, but he's an ally of America, so he's kind of in a difficult position, and so one wonders how he's managing since he became king in 1999. So looking at King Abdullah II's horoscope, here's his chart. The first thing that strikes me about this chart is the Aquarius. There was a huge build-up of planets in Aquarius at the beginning of 1962. I think there was one day when all 7 traditional planets were in Aquarius. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And some people were suggesting, oh, this is a birth of the Antichrist or something. Now, King Abdullah has 5 of the 7 traditional planets in Aquarius. That is a lot. Now, in terms of my memories of him at school, I can't remember anything particularly Aquarian about him. But that Aquarius, it may give him a considerable amount of objectivity. He may be able to sort of step back and look at the situation for what it is, and have some kind of emotional detachment. I mean, that is possible. He may be able to think about this situation intellectually. I mean, that's one way of seeing it. Now, he has Mars fairly close to the ascendant, and I think this Mars, it's a really good Mars. It's Mars, late Capricorn. Mars is in its exaltation. That Mars rising may have a lot to do with how he's managed to stay in power. It's Mars is assertive, but it's not assertive like Mars in Aries. Mars in Capricorn has a certain amount of restraint, but kind of gets what it wants in the end. And it is sextile Moon. He has Moon in Scorpio. Not a great Moon. And it's his only planet. It's his only planet in a water sign. Okay, he's got Neptune, but Neptune is a generational planet. So possibly someone who has got a long memory, someone who doesn't forgive and doesn't forget, maybe. But that Moon in Scorpio does seem to be working. Now, why would that Moon in Scorpio be working? When it's in such a bad position by sign. Well, I think if you look at it in terms of sect, S-E-C-T, King Abdullah was born at night. And so the moon likes it when it's a nighttime chart. That's the first point. And when the moon is when you've got a nighttime chart, the moon likes to be above the horizon, and it is above the horizon in the 10th house. And thirdly, the moon is a feminine planet, and it's in Scorpio, a feminine sign. So that moon is nothing like as bad as it seems to be on the surface when you look at it in terms of sex. If you, Robert Hahn wrote a booklet about this where he went into all this stuff in great detail. I think he mentioned, Bill Clinton's Saturn. I think it was Bill Clinton's Saturn, which, if I remember rightly, Bill Clinton's Saturn was in its detriment, but because it was it in Leo? I can't remember what sign. Let me just quickly look at Bill Clinton's chart. Sorry to. You see, Bill Clinton had Saturn in Leo in the 10th house, so Saturn was in its detriment in Leo. Not so good, but Saturn is Saturn is a daytime planet in a daytime chart. It's a masculine planet. Leo is a masculine sign, so Saturn actually worked very well in Bill Clinton's chart, and likewise with King Abdullah's moon. That moon in Scorpio, because it's above the horizon and in the 10th house, it's not working as badly as it seems on the surface. Now, one thing that I think is quite dangerous about Abdullah's chart, given the fact that he's a king, is that he's got Uranus on Regulus. Regulus is the royal star. And so if you have got Uranus on Regulus, that could be about, the sudden deposing of a king. Having Uranus there is dangerous, and it's being in the last degree of a sign may make it a bit extra make it particularly difficult. That is really something that Abdullah has to watch out for, that Uranus on Regulus. Will he be able to see out his kingship without going into exile or worse? That's something to be seen. Now, the reason this particular reason I wanted to look at Abdullah's chart, is the Palestine thing is always going to have a bearing on what goes on in Jordan. You can't avoid it. Is Pluto. So Pluto, as I speak, is stationary. It's come to a standstill, and it stations at 2754 Capricorn, and Abdullah's Mars is at 2749 Capricorn. So Pluto is stationing exactly on Abdullah's Mars. Now, it may be that station simply reflects what's going on in Gaza and how that impacts Jordan. And I'm sure that from a political perspective, Abdullah is having to spend all his time dealing with the fallout from the Palestinian issue and keeping that objectivity. Maybe the Aquarius is helping him with that objectivity, but he's got to appease the Arab world, but he's also got to appease the population of his country, but he's also got to appease the Americans, and that's always a difficulty. Remember, it is America's Pluto. Right now is America's Pluto return. So he doesn't just have transiting Pluto on his Mars, he has all the time America's Pluto on his Mars. So he's having to deal with pressure from America, I would guess, all the time. And him being an ally of America. And he also has Uranus problems. Uranus is, where's Uranus at the moment? Uranus is, let me just look it up. Where's Uranus right now? The precise degree of Uranus. Uranus at the moment on the 14th is at about 2216 Taurus, approximately, something like that. And his is going retrograde, and his Mercury is at 2214 Aquarius. So Abdullah has transiting Uranus over the next few days is going to be square his Mercury, and that's a lot for his mind to deal with. Mercury is the mind; it's dealing with news. Uranus is really stirring things up. So I think we can see that he must be under a lot of mental stress. And then he's got his moon in Scorpio square Mercury. So he's recently had Uranus opposition Mercury. And then it's coming to the square. Sorry, he's recently had Uranus opposition the moon, and that Uranus is now coming to a square of Mercury. So you can see that things are really being stirred up, and yeah, Mercury goes retrograde, and then next year it will run over all this stuff again, and there you have his Uranus, his Mercury, and then he's got his moon in Scorpio, Mercury in Aquarius, then he's got widely got moon square Uranus, and that Uranus, as I said, is conjunct Regulus, the royal star. So it's going to be difficult, not just now, but sort of next year as Uranus moves into the last degrees of Taurus, when it sort of activates midpoints involving the Moon, Mercury, and Uranus. That's going to be difficult for him. But what I think really helps him is that Mars in Capricorn. I think it's a really strong Mars. It's being activated by Pluto at the moment. He's really needing that Mars, and I suppose what he has to do is resist the temptation to sort of strike out in an inappropriate way. He has to get everything right. It's tough, and he is relying on this Moon in Scorpio in the 10th house to pick up on the feelings in the Arab world and in his own country. And so far the Moon in Scorpio has probably done quite a good job, because it's a nighttime chart, because it's above the horizon, because it's a feminine planet in a feminine sign. So that's all I'm going to say about King Abdullah, and I understand he's got a tough job, and I wish him all the best. Anyway, I will talk to you again tomorrow.